Good morning. Mr Castleton.
Please, Your Honour, the hearing schedule for today is as follows. I will address Your Honour in relation to the inquest into the deaths of Patrick and Robert Sawway and the inquest into the death of Ross Rickson. My learned friend Mr Wilcox will address Your Honour on the cause and origin of the Bills Crossing Crowdy Bay fire and the related inquest into the death of Julie Fletcher. And then finally I'll address Your Honour in relation to the cause and origin of the Carrai Creek and Carrai East fires, followed by the inquest into the death of Barry Parsons. If it's convenient, Your Honour, I propose now to address Your Honour in relation to the inquest into the deaths of Patrick and Robert Sawway.
Thank you.
Your Honour, these are the closing submissions for the inquests into the deaths of Robert and Patrick Sawway. Robert and Patrick tragically died on the 31st of December 2019 at 787 Wandella Road, Wandella in New South Wales. The cause of their deaths was thermal injury sustained on the 31st of December 2019 in connection with the Badger Forest Fire. Your Honour sees on screen a photograph of Robert, Patrick and Janelle, the mother of Patrick and the wife of Robert. Robert Sawway was 63 years old and his son Patrick was 29 years old when they died in the morning of 31 December 2019. They were found deceased in a paddock of their property known as Wingrove at 787 Wandella Road, Wandella, after attempting to defend it from the Badger Forest Fire. The Badger Forest Fire, as Your Honour knows, had been burning since 27 December 2019. It swept through the township of Wandella, impacting properties on the 31st of December, including Wingrove, where Robert and Patrick lived with their families. Robert and Patrick, as I said, were father and son. They were putting out spot fires in a paddock on their property when they became caught in a firestorm which hit at approximately 7:25 a.m. on the 31st of December. They were discovered deceased 50 to 80 metres from the western side of the main residence shortly after the firestorm passed through. As I said a moment ago, the cause of their deaths was found at autopsy to be thermal injury. I come now, Your Honour, to set out a brief chronology of events. At the time of the fires, Robert and his wife Janelle lived at Wingrove, a 220-acre beef farm. The rural property, located 8.4 kilometres northwest of the township of Cobargo, was mostly cleared pasture for grazing cattle. They had 140 head and 12 horses. The property was divided into multiple paddocks by electric fencing and had a main residence comprising 3 bedrooms and a double brick farmhouse. Patrick and his wife Renee lived on another self-contained house on the property, detached from the main residence. They had one young child, Harley. Patrick ran his engineering business out of the shed on the property. 2 to 3 days before the impact of the Badger Forest Fire on Wandella, Peter Anderson, a landowner and adjoining neighbour of the Sawways, observed a fire to the west of his property. In his oral evidence to the court, Peter indicated that a friend who had been trying to put in a fire break with a bulldozer on top of the mountain in the Coronial area unsuccessfully told him, "It's uncontrollable, we can't stop it, and it's on its way towards you people." On 30 December, Robert and Janelle visited Robert's mother in a nursing home in Bega. They saw a family member who was also a member of the RFS who told them that the Badger Forest Fire was getting worse, that they should return home and prepare their property. At around 1:30 p.m, Patrick and Renee had a conversation about the fires which were burning towards Wandella. Patrick told Renee that there was ash starting to fall from the sky and that he was going to have to prepare for the fires in case they arrived. Sometime that afternoon they went to Bega to pick up a horse truck and gooseneck trailer with the intention of taking their horses to Bega Showground for refuge the following day. Around 2:30 to 3 p.m, Robert and Janelle returned to Wingrove to prepare the property for the impending fire. They moved cattle, connected hoses to taps around the house and filled tanks with water, positioning these at the side of the house. Throughout the afternoon and evening of the 30th of December, Robert and Patrick spent hours helping friends and neighbours in Wandella prepare their own properties for the fire. Patrick selflessly assisted others very late into the night. Earlier that evening at 7:52 p.m, Renee sent Patrick an SMS message asking him why he was staying put and putting himself at risk. According to Renee, Patrick replied to say that it was all good, that he would be fine and would be home later. At 10:24 p.m, Renee received a text message from Patrick to inform her that he was actively fighting the fires at Alcock's Farm, the home of a client of Patrick's. He was ploughing a firebreak around the property and house. In his oral evidence, Peter Anderson told the court that he observed from a hill at the back of his house a red glow to the west of his property, which was the fire front heading their way. He described the fire as roaring like a raging bull coming out of the mountains. He told Your Honour that the weather conditions that evening, that is the 30th of December, were calm, with little wind but very warm. The immense spread of the fire on the evening of 30 December and the following morning was unexpected. During the court's general inquiry into fire prediction, David Philp, fire behaviour analyst, gave evidence that the sheer spread of the fire was a consequence of long-distance spotting as the fire moved down the valley. That could entail spotting 30 kilometres and beyond downwind. Dr. Marsden Smedley, expert witness, agreed that this was a plausible explanation. Spotting at such distances was beyond the comprehension of any of the models used by the RFS during the 2019-2020 bushfire season. At around 2:30 a.m. on the 31st of December, Renee telephoned Patrick. Patrick told her that he had been allowed passage to return home through the Snowy Mountains Highway, which was blocked. Renee informed Patrick that the fire was coming in the direction of the property and of her intention to take their young son Harley away to her mother's home in Mystery Bay, as she could hear the rumble of the fire. Following that conversation, Robert appeared at Renee's house on his quad bike. They had a conversation in which Robert told Renee that Patrick had better return quickly. At 12:24 a.m, Renee sent Patrick a text message to convey that Robert asked him to hurry home. At 12:51 a.m, Renee sent Patrick a text message warning him that the fire was going to be hot and big. Renee headed to Mystery Bay, where she dropped off their son Harley at her mother's house. At 2:10 a.m, Renee returned home to see that Patrick had also arrived home. They had a conversation about the fires and their plan whilst organising and preparing the property for the approaching fires. In the early hours of the 31st of December, the Saways had transported their horses to Cobargo Showground for safety. At some point prior to the fires descending on Wingrove, Renee left to return to Mystery Bay as Harley was not settling. At 4 a.m, Robert, Patrick and Janelle were outside the family farmhouse observing the fires, which were travelling in an easterly direction before changing directions twice, then headed towards their property. According to the oral evidence of Peter Anderson, the glow from the fire and its roar became stronger and louder throughout the evening and early hours of the 31st of December. He told Your Honour that around 4:45 p.m, the weather conditions changed dramatically, with temperatures reaching towards 40 degrees and the wind blowing at 30 to 40 knots from the west, which to him was remarkable for that time of the morning. He said that the fire turned at Yowrie and headed around towards Kuama, along the back end of Kuama, and became hotter as it turned then towards them from a west to southwest direction, before diverging and coming from various directions. That is when the embers hit, dropping like little bombs, he said. In her statement to police, Janelle indicates that whilst watching the fire, she saw embers fall into their paddocks. At that point, Robert and Patrick worked together to battle the fire and to create fire breaks around the farmhouse and outbuildings. Robert was on the quad bike with a spray tank attached, attending to spot fires, while Patrick was driving the tractor with a disc plough in an effort to construct fire breaks around the property. Janelle drove around the property on a motorbike. Janelle describes that as she was driving on the motorbike towards the machinery shed, she could feel the intensity of the heat from the fire. She felt the blue metal stones of the driveway hitting her with their heat. She observed pine trees behind the work shed on fire and then drove back to the farmhouse to check on Robert and Patrick. After feeling out for a hose in the dark to put out fires on the steps to the farmhouse, she shouted out for Robert and heard him say, "Patrick, Patrick," in a faint voice. At approximately 7:25 a.m, a fire thunderstorm, known as a pyrocumulus event, hit the paddock in the area where Patrick and Robert were working, about 50 to 80 metres to the west of the farmhouse. Janelle observed thick smoke and rode her bike to the back of the farmhouse, where she observed that the roller doors to the shed had been blown out, including the whole eastern side of the shed wall, which had bent around a water tank. Janelle then heard Robert say again, "Patrick, Patrick," and was trying to find him. When the smoke and darkness started to clear, Janelle tragically found the bodies of Robert and Patrick on the paddock in different locations. At 8:15 a.m, Janelle contacted emergency services. At 2 p.m, New South Wales police attended the scene. They had been unable to attend earlier due to the active fire and obstruction of the access of roads. On 6 January 2020, Detective Senior Sergeant Gregory Moon attended the property to undertake an examination of the scene. On 8 January 2020, forensic pathologist Bernard Eons performed an autopsy on both Robert and Patrick. The official cause of death on the autopsy reports of 27 and 28 February 2020, respectively, was thermal injury. Your Honour has received into evidence 2 volumes of material comprising 303 pages in total. The 2 separate briefs of evidence include statements from family members, Janelle Solway, Robert's wife and Patrick's mother, from Aaron Solway, Robert's son and Patrick's brother, and Renee Solway, Patrick's wife and Robert's daughter-in-law. Statements from civilian witnesses, Peter Anderson, and of course statements from members of the New South Wales Police Force. Your Honour also received into evidence a further volume comprising photographs and videos for the far southern region of fires, which included photographs from 787 Wandella Road, Wandella, as well as a general brief relating more broadly to the southern region of New South Wales. The officer in charge of the investigation, Glenn Bradley, gave oral evidence on the 6th of September 2021 in respect of the Badger Forest fire and all related deaths. The Solway's neighbour, Peter Anderson, gave oral evidence on 7 September 2021. Janelle Solway also provided a family statement. Pursuant to Section 81 of the Coroners Act, the coroner holding an inquest concerning the death of a person is required to make findings as to the identity of the person who died, when and where they died, and what was the cause and the manner of the person's death. In addition, the coroner may make recommendations considered necessary or desirable in relation to matters which have the capacity to improve public health and safety in the future arising out of the death in question. In this inquest, Robert and Patrick Solway's identities are known, as is the date and place of their deaths. For this reason, the inquest into Robert and Patrick Solway's death focused on the cause and manner of their deaths. The evidence as to the circumstances of Robert and Patrick's deaths was centred around the statements of the family provided to police, the oral evidence of neighbour Peter Anderson, and the investigations of police. The evidence before the court indicates that Robert and Patrick Solway planned to protect their property as they believed they were in a good position to deal with any approaching fires. They had worked together to plough fire breaks and extinguish spot fires. They then most likely made the decision to head back towards the house to seek protection from the approaching fire front before they were caught in a pyrocumulus event at approximately 7:25 a.m. on the 31st of December 2019. In her statement to police, Renee Solway indicates that in the early hours of the 31st of December, she discussed the fires with Patrick and their plan was not to leave the property, but to protect it, as Robert had assured them that the property was prepared and that there was nothing around the property for the fire to impact. Janelle Solway gave similar evidence in her second statement to police, She said that Robert felt they were in a good position to deal with any spot fires easily, as their property was mostly cleared, with very little grass given the drought. In oral evidence and in his statement to police, Peter Anderson, the Solway's closest neighbour, told the court that at about 4:45 or 5 p.m, the New South Wales RFS drove up and down Yowie Road, warning residents to evacuate. This occurred prior to the fire impacting their properties. Mr Anderson recalled that he did not heed the warning to evacuate, as he believed that he could protect his property as he had ample water and was not alone. Mr Anderson explained to the court that he had no idea where the fire front was because the spot fires were just bombing everywhere, and he had come together as one unit. He described that at about 5:30 a.m, spot fires had rolled through and the conditions became worse, with the fires developing into a firestorm. He said this: "The fires which were burning were travelling at an extreme speed and burning paddocks which had very little fuel in them. The fire was 2 metres in height and rolling like a wave in the ocean. I've seen nothing like it in my lifetime." Mr Anderson believed that he was on the edge of the firestorm when it passed through before it headed towards the Solway property. He was of the view that Patrick and Robert must have been in direct line of the firestorm. Detective Moon is of the expert opinion that the initial fire front from the Badger Forest fire moved through the Solway property and a pyrocumulus event followed. According to Detective Moon, the initial fire front damaged a number of Solway's paddocks. He considers that Robert and Patrick continued to work to contain the spotting and the damage done by the initial fire front. They likely continued to plough the burnt paddocks and attempted to put out spot fires. He formed the view that the pyrocumulus event hit the area at around 7:25 a.m, at which point Robert and Patrick were likely attempting to head back to the property to shelter, having had little to no warning of the impending firestorm. In his expert report, Detective Moon outlined that the indicators of this pyrocumulus event were the extreme damage to the trees at the location and the surrounding properties, which indicates extreme winds, the destruction of a number of properties to the northwest of the location, which suffered the direct events of the cyclonic winds. This included evidence of the spread of debris, including parts of vehicles moved up to 500 metres from their original positions. And, as Your Honour sees in this photograph, the destruction of the tractor and quad bike. Moreover, Detective Moon said the winds in the firestorm uprooted large trees in the immediate area, and limbs from the trees were found strewn over 100 metres from where they once stood. The force of the wind removed the roller doors and the side walls of the Colorbond steel shed from its footing, as indicated in the evidence of Janelle Solway. Detective Moon outlined the indicators that supported his opinion that Robert and Patrick were heading towards the house to seek protection from the approaching fire front. The direction of travel of the tractor was towards the house and from the northeast. Evidence is shown by the plough marks leading away from the rear of the disc plough. Patrick had only moved a short distance from the tractor before collapsing near the fence. The apparent path of the quad bike was towards the southeast, evident from the damage occasioned to the fence and pickets bent over near the location of the tractor. It appeared that Robert had hit the fence at speed and was either thrown off or dismounted the quad bike and moved back towards the tractor after pushing it over the fence. In his statement, Aaron Solway told investigating police this: "I don't think Dad or Patrick would have risked their lives to stay if they knew what was coming their way. I believe that they thought they would be able to stay and protect the property. The fire was so swift and severe that they could not know what was happening till the fire hit them." The same sentiment was conveyed by Janelle, who said in her statement, "I think we prepared well for a normal fire. We have dealt with them before, and each year we reduced hazards around the property. I don't know anyone could have been prepared for what impacted upon our property that morning. In our submission, noting the above, Your Honour, we do not contend for any recommendations. Coming, if I may, then, to the formal aspect of Your Honour's inquiry, manner and cause. The pathologist at autopsy concluded that Robert Sorway's cause of death was thermal injury and Patrick Sorway's cause of death was thermal injury. Accordingly, Your Honour, in our respectful submission, Your Honour would make the following findings under Section 81 of the Coroners Act: that Robert Sorway died in the morning of 31 December 2019 at 787 Wandella Road, Wandella, from thermal injuries while attempting to protect his property during a fire called the Badger Forest Fire. Further, that Your Honour would make a finding that Patrick Sorway died in the morning of 31 December 2019 at 787 Wandella Road, Wandella, from thermal injuries while attempting to protect his family's property during a fire called the Badger Forest Fire. Your Honour sees an image on the screen of Janelle and Robert. Those assisting, Your Honour, express our sincere gratitude to Janelle Sorway, wife of Robert, Renee Sorway, wife of Patrick, Aaron Sorway, son of Robert. You see on screen now, Your Honour, Renee and Patrick, and Aaron is also the brother of Patrick, and also to Peter Anderson, their neighbour, for their involvement and willingness to participate in and assist, Your Honour, in relation to the Coronial investigation into their tragic deaths. We'd also like, Your Honour, to express our sincere condolences to the Sorway family and to their friends for the loss of Robert and Patrick under such devastating and tragic circumstances.
Thank you, Mr.
May it please the Court. I move now, Your Honour, to address, Your Honour, in relation to the inquest into the death of Ross Rickson. These are the closing submissions for the inquest into the death of Ross Rickson. Ross tragically died at 3:24am on 18 January 2020 at Concord General Hospital following burns sustained on the 31st of December 2019 during the Badger Forest Fire. Your Honour will see on screen now a photograph of Ross. Ross was 84 years of age. He had sustained facial burns when the fire front of the Badger Forest Fire passed through his property in Cobargo on the 31st of December 2019. On the evening of the 30th of December and the following morning, the Badger Forest Fire took a substantial run of unanticipated proportions and swept through the township of Cobargo, impacting properties including the rural property where Ross had lived. And Your Honour will see an image now of that fire spreading on the 30th of December. Having alerted his neighbours of the approaching fire, Ross returned to his property where he was exposed to the intensity of the firestorm, causing burns to his face and ears. He was transported to the South East Regional Hospital in Bega for treatment before being admitted to the burns unit of the Concord Hospital. Ross died 18 days after sustaining his injuries. The cause of his death was found at autopsy to be ischemic heart disease. Ross had lived on the same property in Cobargo since 1995 with his late wife, Marjorie. It included a single-level dwelling consisting of 2 bedrooms, a bathroom and living rooms. Ross remained on the property after the passing of his wife and continued to work until the day of his injuries. On 26 December 2019, Ross attended a family birthday celebration in Bermagui. Ross expressed to his daughter June Tarlington that the fire would burn strong because the forest floor vegetation was so thick and heavy. On 27 December, the following day, the Badger Forest Fire ignited from a lightning strike at the intersection of Badger Forest Road and Churros Falls Road. Burning in dense forest with extremely high fuel loads, the fire initially spread at a rapid speed. In the days leading up to the impact of the fire on Cobargo, Ross had attended to preparations, including gathering his belongings in 2 utility vehicles. He created a fire break on a hill on his property in the hope that the fire would not impact the vehicles and his tools. On the evening of 30 December, Ross spoke with his neighbours, Stephen and Helen Stafford. In his statement to police, Stephen said this: "When we got home, Helen went and spoke with Ross and told him we were back. She told him that we were getting ready to leave if need be. She told me that Ross had also packed his truck and trailer ready to leave." Between 9:43 p.m. on the 30th of December and the morning of the 31st of December, the Badger's Forest Road fire had spread an incredible 35 kilometres downslope in what was described as extreme and anomalous fire behaviour by the RFS. In the early hours of the 31st of December, the front of the Badger's Forest Road fire had approached Cobargo. That spread was not predicted and did not accord with forecast weather conditions. During the court's general inquiry into fire prediction, David Phelps, fire behaviour analyst, gave evidence that the sheer spread of the fire was a consequence of long-distance spotting as the fire moved down the valley. That could entail spotting 30 kilometres and beyond downwind. Dr. Marsden Smedley, expert witness, agreed this was a plausible explanation. Spotting at such distances was beyond the comprehension of any of the prediction models used by the RFS during the 2019-2020 bushfire season. That night, Ross contacted Stephen Stafford to check that they were leaving. He then telephoned other neighbours to ensure they were all leaving their properties. In particular, Ross called another neighbour and long-time friend, James Neal. James was awoken by Ross yelling to him outside his house and beeping his car horn. James attributes the actions of Ross to saving his life. James left his own property and saw Ross drive back towards his own property, likely, in his view, to try to save it. It was at this time that Ross was exposed to the ferocity of the fire front at the Badger Forest Road fire. He sustained facial burns and his property was completely destroyed by the impact of the fire. And Your Honour sees now the remains of Ross's residence. According to Ross's daughter June, notwithstanding the injury sustained from the fire, Ross then went to Norm Reed's house to inform him that he had been burned and that he was going to the bakery to get a coffee. In attempting to drive himself to the bakery, Ross was located by another neighbour, Shane Sweeney, sitting in his car at a gate as a tree had fallen and crossed the road. Shane cut the tree away and helped Ross into Cobargo to the bakery. The owners of the bakery called an ambulance and Ross was transported to the South East Regional Hospital in Bega for treatment for his facial burns. On 1 January 2020, Ross was admitted to the burns unit of the Concord General Hospital, where he received surgical debridement and dressings with further ongoing dressing care and wound review. Ross remained at the hospital until 6 January 2020, when he was discharged and transferred to accommodation at the Concord Hospital Hostel so that he could attend outpatient appointments at that hospital. Over the following 12 days, Ross's wounds continued to heal. Around 2:30 a.m. on the 18th of January, while at the hostel, Ross awoke with chest pains and laboured breathing. He alerted his daughter, Patricia Lawson, who was with him at the time. Medical staff attended and performed CPR as he had stopped breathing. He was admitted into the emergency department, however, there was no response. At 3:24 a.m. on 18 January 2020, Ross was pronounced deceased. Post-mortem examination of Ross's chest revealed that he had severe narrowing in the 3 main coronary arteries and there was evidence of an acute myocardial infarction. According to the forensic pathologist, the facial burn sustained had been healing well and did not contribute to Ross's cause of death. Your Honour has received into evidence a volume of material comprising 264 pages, which includes a statement from Ross's daughter June, statements from civilian witnesses, statements from members of New South Wales Police, and medical records from the South Eastern Regional Hospital in Bega and the Concord General Hospital here in Sydney. Your Honour also received into evidence a further volume comprising photographs and videos for the far southern regions of fires, which included photographs from Lot 4 Tip Road, Cobargo, as well as a general brief relating more broadly to the southern region of New South Wales. The officer in charge, Detective Glenn Bradley, gave oral evidence on the 6th of September 2021 in respect to the Badger Forest Fire and all related deaths. The court also heard from James Neal, Ross's neighbour, on 8 September 2021. Ross's daughter June also provided a family statement following the close of evidence for the benefit of Your Honour and the public more generally. As Your Honour knows, pursuant to Section 81 of the Coroners Act, the coroner holding an inquest concerning the death of a person is required to make findings as to the identity of the person who died, when and where they died, and what was the cause and the manner of the person's death. In addition, the coroner may make recommendations considered necessary or desirable in relation to matters which have the capacity to improve health and safety in the future, arising out of the death in question. In this inquest, Ross's identity is known, as is the date and place of his death. For this reason, the inquest into Ross's death focused on the manner and cause of his death. In oral evidence, James Neal, Ross's neighbour, stated that he was awoken by Ross and told to get out. James described the conditions around Cobargo as like hell, with large balls of fire with wind swirling around in every direction. He jumped into his car to follow Ross, whose headlights were visible through the smoke. James noticed that Ross had turned left into his property while James had turned towards the highway, where he was later approached by police. James recalled a conversation he had with Lee Sweeney, in which Lee said that he found Ross and the wind had picked him up and threw him up against the tree. He had arrived just as Ross was coming to. He put Ross in the car and sent him downtown, where James had encountered him. James described seeing Ross get out of the car and observed significant burns to his face and head. His hair was burnt. James urged Sandy, the owner of the bakery, to call an ambulance as he feared that Ross would go into shock. An autopsy was conducted following Ross's death, which revealed areas of severe atherosclerotic narrowing in the three main coronary arteries, with an area of pallor in the posterior lateral wall of the left ventricle, suggestive of an acute myocardial infarction. The examination also revealed that the areas of burn injury on the nose and right ear appeared to be healing well and were otherwise unremarkable. Ross's cause of death was determined to be ischemic heart disease. On this basis, Your Honour, it is submitted that Ross's cause of death is ischemic heart disease. Accordingly, in our respectful submission, Your Honour would make the following formal findings under Section 81 of the Coroners Act: that Ross Rickson died at approximately 3:24 a.m. on 18 January 2020 at Concord Repatriation General Hospital, Hospital Road, Concord. The cause of death was ischemic heart disease, which he suffered while being treated as an outpatient for facial burns sustained on 31 December 2019 during the Badger Forest Fire. Your Honour sees on the screen now a photograph of Ross and his daughter June. Those assisting Your Honour express our sincere gratitude to Ross's family, in particular to his daughter June, for her involvement in the Coronial investigation and for liaising with members of the team assisting Your Honour. Your Honour, the council assisting team also express their sincere condolences to the Rickson family, including his children, Alan, Patricia and June, and to Ross's extended family for their tragic loss. May it please you, Your Honour. I'll just invite Mr Wilcox to address Your Honour in relation to the Bills Crossing Crowdy Bay fire.
Mr Wilcox.
Yes, Your Honour. These are the closing submissions for the inquiry into the Bills Crossing Crowdy Bay fire. The inquiry has been conducted pursuant to Section 30, subsection 1 of the Coroners Act and is accordingly limited to determining the cause of the fire and the area of its origin, if able to be established to the satisfaction of the court. The Bills Crossing Crowdy Bay fire started on 26 October 2019. It burned for approximately 9 weeks until it was declared out on 26 December 2019. During that time, it impacted approximately 13,400 hectares in a mid-coast local government area encompassed within the lands of the Biripi people. The Cat-Eye wetlands are reported to have sustained significant damage, both environmental and structural, requiring the wetlands to be closed to the public for a year. It's also reported that a staggering 84% of the Crowdy Bay National Park, approximately 9,000 hectares, was impacted by the fire, including a large area of critical koala habitat. 6 properties were damaged and 2 houses were destroyed, including Kylie's hut, a historic small hut and former residence of the Australian author Kylie Tennant during the 1940s, donated to the National Park as a retreat for writers in the community. Tragically, on the 8th of November 2019, the fire impacted the township of Johns River and the property of Julie Fletcher, resulting in her death. Whilst evidence in one hearing has been treated as evidence in the other, closing submissions will address the fire inquiry and the inquest for Ms Fletcher separately, with submissions into that inquest to follow on immediately from this inquiry. The Bills Crossing fire was one of many fires across the state of New South Wales in the 2019 to 2020 bushfire season. Not all fires were reported to Your Honour. Not all fires reported to Your Honour proceeded to a coronial inquiry into cause and origin, and not all fires that proceeded to a coronial inquiry into cause and origin continued to further consideration via a general inquiry as part of stage 2 of Your Honour's proceedings. It's submitted that it's not necessary for the Bills Crossing Crowdy Bay fire to proceed to further investigation via a general inquiry, as it's not possible for the court to attempt to answer every question raised and every brief collated across the 2019 to 2020 bushfire season, and matters that might arise in relation to this fire, such as the nature and adequacy of warnings to residents in the fire's path, have been addressed at a systemic level in the course of other inquiries during the Stage 2 representative case study hearings. Turning to a chronology, on 26 October 2019, Rowan Lund, New South Wales Rural Fire Service Air Attack Supervisor, and Jason Oliver, pilot in command, were on duty in aircraft Bird Dog 376. They were engaged in various firefighting operations relating to the Carrai Creek, Schultz Road, Muck Creek Road, and Failford Road Darrenlink fires. At around 5:53 p.m, as they headed south to the Failford Road Darrenlink fire to continue line building efforts, Mr Lund states that they observed a column of smoke in bushland due west of Crowdy Head, adjacent to Cat-Eye Creek, on the east side of the waterway, near the junction of 2 Mile Creek. Some aerial photographs are now displayed on screen, which were taken by Mr Lund. This was some 47 minutes after a suspected lightning strike is believed to have struck that area. At 6:03 p.m, Mr Lund reported the fire to the RFS incident controller at the time, Cam Baker. Another aircraft, Bomber 138, was retasked to drop a load of gel at the location of the fire. It delivered its first drop at 6:36 p.m. and the remainder shortly thereafter. A further aircraft, Bomber 165, deployed its load at about 6:55 p.m. Unfortunately, these attempts were unsuccessful in extinguishing the fire, and on account of the ensuing darkness of the night, the aircraft all returned to base at Coffs Harbour. Between 28 and 29 October 2019, on account of the wind and the fire burning predominantly in heathland, the fire was mapped as making multiple rapid runs in different directions, spreading approximately 2.5 kilometres to the south-southeast, before spreading approximately 3 to 4 kilometres south-southeast, as displayed on screen now with some fire progression mapping. The fire impacted the Crowdy Bay National Park and encroached upon the Harrington Township. The RFS vigorously directed their efforts towards property protection in the area and to slowing the progress of the fire overnight. Over the next week, firefighting crews and aircraft worked to strengthen containment lines near Harrington, which were ultimately effective in largely preventing the fire from impacting residences in that location, and the fire had burnt some 2 kilometres north. On 7 November 2019, the fire took another significant run, spreading approximately 5 to 6 kilometres to the east-southeast, again tearing through the National Park, and then some 1.5 to 2 kilometres towards Coralville Road, Coralville. Following day, 8 November 2019, the fire was initially mapped as spreading slowly north. By mid-afternoon, the fire commenced a significant rapid spread to the northeast towards Diamond Head. Between 1:32 p.m. and 6:59 p.m, the fire was mapped as spreading a staggering 7 kilometres in approximately 3 hours. The fire then spread 2 to 3 kilometres to the northwest into the evening and into the early morning of 9 November 2019. During this period, the fire impacted the locality of Johns River and Ms. Fletcher's property, where she tragically died. In the 7 weeks thereafter, the fire was largely either mapped as not spreading but continuing to remain active, and or remaining relatively stationary or not progressing, providing opportunity for firefighting efforts to prevail. On screen now is an extract of fire progression mapping for the period 22 to 23 December 2019. By 9:06 a.m. on the 26th of December 2019, the fire was authorised as out. The court received into evidence a volume of material comprising 105 pages, including statements from members of New South Wales Police, RFS, for the Fire Investigation Report, RFS operational documents, Bureau of Meteorology weather data and lightning mapping. Mark Fulliger, fire investigator from the RFS, also gave oral evidence on the 21st of March 2022. Pursuant to Section 81 of the Coroners Act, the coroner holding an inquiry concerning a fire is required to make findings as to the date and place of the fire and the circumstances of that fire. In addition, the coroner may make recommendations considered necessary or desirable in relation to any matter connected with the fire inquiry. In this inquiry, the central focus was identifying where and when the Bills Crossing Crowdy Bay fire originated and the cause of the fire. On 11 November 2019, a cause and origin scene investigation was carried out by fire investigator Mark Fulliger, operations officer from the RFS. On screen now is a map identifying coordinates of a suspect lightning strike. Mr. Fulliger attempted to access the location of the suspected lightning strike by entering the Cat-Eye wetlands off Spring Hill Road by car and then walking to the location. He was unable to progress more than 500 metres from his car due to the thick vegetation and terrain. Nonetheless, he stated that he observed indicators on a drive to the area, indicative of the fire having travelled from the area in a south and southeasterly direction into the township of Harrington. Following his investigation, including review of lightning data, line scans and fire mapping, Mr. Fulliger concluded that the Bills Crossing Crowdy Bay fire was caused by a lightning storm that passed through the area on the afternoon of 26 October 2019. Mr. Fulliger told the court that he was able to exclude other possible causes of the ignition, and lightning was the only confident source of initiation due to the inaccessibility of the area. On 21 May 2020, Senior Constables Jerry Kemp and Michael Nemeth, police crime scene officers attached to the Forensic Evidence and Technical Services Command, Lismore Crime Scene Section, also attempted to attend the suspected area of origin of the fire. They were some 2 kilometres from the estimated area of origin when they terminated their investigation on account of the suspected area of origin not being accessible on foot. Senior Constable Kent reported that by this time, heavy and abundant growth, ground cover regrowth and tree regrowth was evident in the surrounding vegetation, and there were no indications of wildfire direction or movement that subsequently had remained. At the close of the inquiry on 21 March 2022, Senior Counsel assisting Your Honour foreshadowed formal submissions as to the cause and origin of the Bills Crossing Crowley Bay fire. Consistent with those submissions as foreshadowed, it's now submitted that Your Honour could be satisfied that the cause of the fire was a lightning strike on 26 October 2019, and the origin of the Bills Crossing Crowley Bay fire was in bushland in the Cat-Eye wetlands near Cat-Eye Creek, some 3.5 kilometres east of Coopanook, at GPS location -31.82787, 152.65619, and in the vicinity of the first aerial photograph taken of the fire from afar by RFS Air Attack Supervisor Rowan Lund at 5:53 p.m. on 26 October 2019, with the GPS coordinates as supplied with that relevant photograph. Those assisting, Your Honour, express their gratitude to the officer in charge of the investigation, RFS investigator, and the witnesses involved in the cause and origin investigation for their assistance with the coronial inquiry into the Bills Crossing Crowley Bay fire. While we note the court will receive closing submissions into the inquest of Julie Fletcher, we conclude our submissions at this stage by extending our condolences to the family and friends of Ms. Fletcher, who tragically lost her life as a result of that fire. If it's convenient, Your Honour, I'll turn directly to the inquest into the death of Julie Fletcher. These are the closing submissions for the inquest into the death of Julie Fletcher. Julie, the middle sister of 3 siblings, was 63 years old when she died at around 11:05 p.m. on Friday, 8 November 2019, at a property located at 232 Wharf Road, Johns River, due to the effects of fire in connection with the Bills Crossing Crowley Bay fire. Julie's property, known as Johns River, was Julie's peaceful space. It was the residence of her late father, Brian Fletcher. In around 2010, Julie moved from Lismore to Johns River to reside with her father so that she could provide him with care and assistance, which she did until the time of his passing in 2012. Subsequently, Julie remained at the property. The property was around 120 acres in size, approximately half of which consisted of a grazing paddock and the homestead, which had originally been built by Julie's father. The other half of the property consisted of swamp forest, and the property adjoins Crowley Bay National Park to the east and south of the property. Displayed on screen now is a Google map image of Julie's property and a picture of the homestead. Julie loved all creatures great and small and cared for many animals on her property, namely 2 beloved pet cats named Bonnie and Clyde, and livestock cattle, including Gary the Bull, Nick the retired trotter, as well as a miniature horse named Mr. Big, and chickens. Julie was known to care about her animals as much as she did people. In the years prior to 2019, Julie suffered some serious health issues. However, she'd overcome those challenges and was living a healthy and meaningful life. It's clear from the statements prepared by the loved ones and friends of Julie that she's fondly revered and remembered as a compassionate, caring, positive and easygoing person with good humour, sensitivity, vulnerability and strength. We also acknowledge the heartfelt family statement given by Julie's sister, Daintree Durand, and the photographs Daintree elected to share of the extended Fletcher family and the Johns River property. Turning to a chronology, the Bills Crossing Crowley Bay fire had been burning since 26 October 2019, and as Your Honour has heard, it was believed to have commenced in the Cat-Eye wetlands east of the Crowley Bay National Park, which was approximately 12 kilometres south of Julie's home. Daintree, who lived on the same road as Julie, stated that they both had been concerned and conscious of the risk of a fire as their properties adjoin the Crowdy Bay National Park. It's understood from Tony Sharp, Julie's partner, that they had discussed a bushfire plan in the days before 8 November 2019. The agreed plan was to open the gates to let the animals out and then evacuate the house early. Tony said that he repeated this plan to Julie constantly to ensure that she would follow the plan. On Thursday, 7 November 2019, a total fire ban order was declared with respect to the mid-coast local government area, including Johns River. That day, the Bills Crossing Crowdy Bay fire took a significant run, spreading from a location of some 2 kilometres north of Harrington towards Coralville Road, Coralville, some 7 to 8 kilometres or 20 minutes drive southeast from Julie's residence. On Friday 8 November 2019, a total fire ban order had again been declared for the mid-coast local government area. At this time, the fire was initially mapped as slowly spreading north. Daintree stated that on this day, she and Julie were aware that the fire could put them at risk if there was a wind change, and they had spoken in the morning about being prepared to leave. Later that day, around lunchtime, Julie left work early to pack some of her belongings due to increasing concerns that the bushfire was approaching her home. Throughout the afternoon, she spoke with a number of friends and neighbours, including Bernadette Warner, Cheryl Wright, Dinny Khan, Robin McGrath and Jodie Bradley, who variously contacted her via text message or phone call to check if she was okay and discuss her plans to leave if the fire approached. By mid-afternoon, the fire had commenced a significant and rapid spread northeast towards Diamond Head, which is situated just to the northeast of Johns River. Between 1:32pm and 6:59pm on 8 November 2019, the fire took an extreme and abnormal run, spreading 7 kilometres in just 3 hours. The fire then spread 2 to 3 kilometres to the northwest in the evening and the early morning of 9 November 2019. This extreme and dangerous fire behaviour goes some way to explaining how the fire took Julie and the residents of Johns River by surprise, and it's demonstrated by the fire progression mapping and now shown on screen. And further some line scans showing the fire's spread. At around 5:30pm, Daintree went to Julie's property to help move livestock and encouraged her to put her cats in a cage and get ready to go. Daintree said she returned home at her nearby property around 6pm to continue with preparations, and tragically that was the last time that Daintree saw Julie. At around 7:40pm, Tony stated that he spoke with Julie over the phone about needing to stay safe and leave early. Tony stated that he did not get the impression that the fire was threatening Julie's house at that time. At 8:22pm, Robin McGrath received a phone call from Julie. She said Julie told her that she had packed her car, but she did not yet have her cats, and she was going to wet some towels down. Robin stated that she and her husband told Julie she had to leave now, and whatever she owned had to stay. Robin recalled that Julie sounded a bit panicky, but agreed with her. Robin stated she did not get any indication that Julie was not going to leave the property at that time. At around 9pm, Daintree stated she had a conversation with Chris Bourne, a friend in the Johns River RFS, who was in Sydney at the time. Chris had called Daintree to check that they were okay and told them to be ready to leave if needed. Following this phone call at approximately 9:09pm, Daintree called Julie and suggested that Julie finish packing and sorting the animals and then travel to her house so that they could make a decision on leaving together. Daintree stated that she relayed to Julie what Chris had told her and discussed what provisions she had in terms of hoses and water. She told Julie that Julie would not be able to defend her property if a fire reached her house. At 9:42pm, Julie texted Tony a photo of the fire in the distance, which is now displayed on screen. At around 10:50pm, the wind changed direction. Daintree and her husband decided that they needed to leave immediately. Daintree phones Julie and told her, "This is urgent. The wind has hit. You need to get out now." Daintree stated that Julie responded, "I've just got out of the shower. I need to have something to eat." To which Daintree replied, "No, you have to leave now." Daintree recalled that the whole conversation was urging Julie to get out. At 10:59 p.m, Daintree stated she called Julie and they spoke for approximately a minute and a half. Daintree asked, "Have you got out? Are you out?" To which Julie responded, "I can't get out. The house is exploding around me," before the phone call dropped out. That was tragically the last time that Daintree and Julie spoke. Fire and rescue records from New South Wales indicate that they received a call from Daintree at 11:03 p.m. Daintree stated she reported that her sister's house was on fire and her sister was trapped inside. After this, Daintree stated that she tried to keep calling Julie back, but there was no answer. She and her husband attempted to drive to Julie's house and had driven some 50 metres down Julie's driveway, which is a few hundred metres long, when they were met with thick smoke and flames in the trees beside the track. They were forced to return to their residence. At about 11:04 p.m, Julie rang 000 and reported to the operator that her house was just about alight and the whole place was going up, and stressed it was really urgent. When the call was transferred to Fire and Rescue New South Wales, she repeated that the whole place is alight all of a sudden. Julie informed the fire and rescue operator that she wanted to get her other cat before she left, but she didn't know where it went, and repeated the whole place is on fire. The fire and rescue operator informed her to look after herself before the animals and advised they would send a truck. She thanked them and hung up. That was the last contact that Julie had with anyone, and it's believed that Julie's house was destroyed by fire shortly after the phone call. Captain Michael Cleland of the New South Wales RFS stated that on 8 November 2019, the Harrington RFS Brigade received a page at 11:07 p.m. reporting a structure alight. After radioing through to Firecom for further details, they were advised that there were multiple houses alight on Wharf Road, Johns River. He stated that he arrived at Wharf Road, Johns River with a crew of another 4 people in an appliance Harrington 1 at about 11:33 p.m, directly behind another RFS appliance, namely Cundall Moto 2. While Harrington 1 was travelling along Wharf Road, Captain Cleland overheard a radio message from Cundall Moto 2 indicating that an elderly woman was trapped inside a residence at 232 Wharf Road, Johns River. Both appliances headed directly to Julie's residence, with Cundall Moto 2 leading the way. Captain Cleland stated that Cundall Moto 2 stopped suddenly when driving up Julie's driveway, requiring Harrington 1 to take evasive action to avoid a collision. Cundall Moto 2 advised Harrington 1 that a large tree had fallen in front of them and they were pulling out as it was too dangerous to continue. There was poor visibility due to smoke and the presence of a firestorm going across the driveway. Harrington 1 reversed, allowing Cundall Moto 2 to attend to other emergencies. 3 crew members, including Captain Cleland, Senior Deputy Captain Robert McPherson and Deputy Captain Garth Honeysett, attempted to make their way up the driveway. They bravely did so through a firestorm with severe ember attack and no visibility due to the intense smoke and strong winds. Captain Cleland reported that he returned to the truck to obtain his portable radio and a thermal imaging camera, while the other 2 crew members continued up the driveway. On his return, Captain Cleland stated that the crew members advised him that there was a 2-storey house completely burnt to the ground, and they had to walk around the remains of the house and had not been able to locate anyone. They'd also seen 2 cars still at the property with no one inside, nor anyone inside the shed nearby the house, which still had a light on. Captain Cleland states that they returned to their appliance and remained, awaiting the arrival of Fire and Rescue New South Wales and New South Wales Police. On 9 November 2019, police forensic crime scene officers, including Senior Constable Warwick Holborough, attached to the Tari crime scene section, attended the house, located bone fragments believed to be the remains of Julie. The remains were located on the western side of the house in a location proximate to Julie's bedroom. Julie's vehicle was still parked in a garage where it had been the day before when Daintree visited. The comparison of Julie's dental records against the remains located at her residence confirmed on the balance of probabilities that the remains belonged to Julie. The court received into evidence a volume of material comprising 378 pages, including statements from members of New South Wales Police, RFS, and several friends and family members of Julie's, RFS operational documents, Bureau of Meteorology, weather data, emergency warnings and alerts, and 000 call records. It also included medical records from Manning Base Hospital and dental records from Warhope Practice with respect to the examination of the remains found at Julie's residence. In addition, the court heard oral evidence from Senior Constable Warwick Holborough, Forensic Examination Technical Services Command, and RFS Captain Michael Cleland. As indicated earlier in these submissions, the court also had the benefit of hearing a family statement, which was prepared and delivered by Daintree. Pursuant to Section 81 of the Coroners Act, the coroner holding an inquest into the death of a person is required to make findings as to the identity of the person who died, when and where they died, and the manner and cause of their death. In addition, the coroner may make recommendations considered necessary or desirable in relation to any matters which have the capacity to improve public health and safety in the future arising out of the death in question. In this inquest, Julie's identity is known, as is the date and place of her death. For this reason, the inquest into Julie's death focused on the manner and cause of her death. Julie did not appreciate how quickly the fire would impact her property. Despite intending to leave, that misapprehension meant that Julie inadvertently stayed at the property until the fire reached her house. She did not want to leave her animals and made a late decision to evacuate. The fire approached Julie's property with such speed and ferocity that she was unable to evacuate in time. Accordingly, it's submitted that no recommendations are warranted in this inquest. The pathologist at autopsy concluded that Julie's cause of death was best described as the effects of fire. It's therefore submitted that this should be recorded as the cause of death, as it captures that Julie's death was as a result of the Bills Crossing Crowdy Bay fire. The manner of Julie's death was as a consequence of her home being engulfed by the Bills Crossing Crowdy Bay fire at about 11 p.m. on the 8th of November 2019. Those assisting Your Honour again express their sincere condolences to Julie's family and loved ones, friends and community for their loss. Thanks, the court.
Thank you, Mr. Wilcox. Yes, Mr. Castleton.
Please, Your Honour. These are the closing submissions for the Coronial inquiry into the cause and origin of the fires known as the Carrai Creek and Carrai East fires. The inquiry has been conducted pursuant to Section 30, subsection 1 of the Coroners Act and is accordingly limited to determining the causes of the fires and area of origin. The Carrai Creek fire burned in the Armidale local government area encompassed within the lands of the Anawan people. The Carrai Creek fire burned a total of 238,601 hectares, comprising approximately 160,000 hectares of the national park, 61,200 hectares of private land, 15,300 hectares of state forest, and 1,800 hectares of other property. The Carrai East fire was made up of several fires and is known to many as the Jacob Spur or Turumbi Complex fire. The Carrai East fire burnt in the Kempsey local government area encompassed within the lands of the Dungeti people. The Carrai East fire destroyed a total area of 150,755 hectares comprising private land, state forest and national park. The Carrai Creek Jacob Spur fire tragically claimed the loss of life of Barry Parsons on the 8th of November 2019. Together, both fires damaged or destroyed at least 90 homes and around 250 outbuildings. Whilst evidence in one hearing has been treated as evidence in the other, closing submissions will address the fire inquiry and related inquest separately, with submissions into the inquest to follow shortly. Your Honour, it is significant to highlight that the Carrai Creek and Carrai East fires were one of many fires burning across the state of New South Wales during the 2019-2020 bushfire season. Not all fires, as Your Honour knows, were reported to Your Honour. Not all fires reported to Your Honour proceeded to a coronial inquiry into cause and origin. And as Your Honour knows, not all fires that proceeded to a coronial inquiry into cause and origin continued to further consideration via a general inquiry as part of Your Honour's Stage 2 proceedings. It is submitted that it was not necessary for the Carrai Creek and Carrai East fires to proceed to further investigation via a general inquiry. Can I deal now with the Carrai Creek fire? 2 lightning strikes were reported on 16 October 2019 in different locations within the vicinity of where the Carrai Creek fire is believed to have originated, being in the vicinity of Carrai Creek west of the Carrai Plateau and east of the Macleay River. Your Honour sees displayed now a map of Carrai Creek showing lightning strikes recorded in the vicinity of the Carrai Creek fire from about 11 a.m. on 16 October to 11 a.m. on 17 October. Importantly, Your Honour, it shows lightning strikes 4046545114 and 4046555684, which sit directly above the 2 separate mapped areas of the fire. Your Honour, the Carrai Creek fire was authorised as going at 11:30 a.m. on 17 October 2019. A situation report or SITREP dated 17 October at 3:21 p.m. records that there were no fire crews on site or available to provide information, and within the following 24 hours a mapping update clarified that the very southwest of the fire was further east than mapping showed. At this time, one of the fires had burned approximately 36 hectares and the other 28 hectares. On 18 October, these 2 areas of fire, suspected to have been ignited by the 2 lightning strikes, coalesced and became known as the Carrai Creek fire. The Carrai Creek fire that remained on the western side of Stockyard Creek remained under the control of the Armidale Glen Innes Section 44 declaration and remained known as the Carrai Creek fire. Dealing, if I may, Your Honour, with the Carrai East fire, on 16 October 2019, lightning was recorded to the west of Kempsey, which is believed to have caused another fire southeast of the Carrai Creek fire, which became known as the Jacob Spur fire. Your Honour sees now a map depicting lightning activity recorded in the vicinity of the Jacob Spur fire from about 11 a.m. on 16 October to 11 a.m. on 17 October. The Jacob Spur fire was authorised as going at 1:38 p.m. on 17 October 2019. This fire, Your Honour, was managed as a Class 2 fire until 26 October, when it came within the Section 44 declaration for the Kempsey and Nambucca local government areas. Your Honour, there is some ambiguity and confusion relating to the naming conventions used by the fires, as different names were given by the officer in charge of the investigation into the cause and origin, the incident controller and the former officer in charge. For clarity, it can be said that 4 separate fires came to form part of the complex known as the Carrai East fire. On 8 November 2019, the Jacob Spur fire eventually merged with another fire known as the Armidale Road fire, and together they became known as the Turumbi Complex fire. This fire, Your Honour, came within the Kempsey-Nambucca Section 44 declaration. Also on the 8th of November, the areas of the Carrai Creek fire that had spread east and entered the Kempsey local government area were managed and mapped as part of the Turumbi Complex fire. On 9 November, another fire, known as the Armidale Road fire, had merged with the Turumbi Complex fire. And on 11 November 2019, Your Honour, the Turumbi Complex fire was renamed Carrai East. That same day, A third fire, the 5-day Creek Fire, had also merged with the Carrai East Fire. Collectively, Your Honour, these fires made up the Carrai East Fire. Dealing now, if I may, Your Honour, with the progression and impact of both fires. In the beginning, both the Carrai Creek and the Carrai East fires were burning at a steady pace and were mapped as spreading short distances in various directions. Steep terrain and dry conditions made initial containment difficult. At this time, resources were stretched across the entire northeast of the state. Aerial support was limited, and crews from the New South Wales Rural Fire Service and National Parks and Wildlife worked to contain the fire, along with, of course, private landowners. On 24 October, RFS discussions were taking place as to whether to set up a new incident management team. A decision was made that the Armidale Fire Control Centre was not suitable, and it was agreed to remain at Glen Innes. At 3 p.m. on 26 October, a further Section 44 declaration was made in respect of the Kempsey and Nambucca local government areas, which brought the Jacob Spur fire within that Section 44 declaration. By 1 November, the Carrai Creek fire had covered most of the Carrai Plateau and had moved outward in all directions, crossing the Macleay River to the north, travelling east towards Bellbrook and Willy and south towards Yarrowitch. The fire was mapped as spreading up to 2 kilometres in various directions. The Jacob Spur fire was mapped as spreading shorter distances of up to 1 kilometre. On 7 and 8 November, firefighters and locals were confronted by treacherous fire weather conditions with high temperatures and strong winds. Your Honour sees now a fire progression map showing the extent of the Carrai Creek fire on 7 November, the bulk of which is shaded in green, and the Jacob Spur fire shaded in purple to the east. By the morning of 8 November, the Carrai Creek fire had moved into the Kempsey local government area and was being managed as part of the Turumbi complex fire. Again, sees a fire progression map with the Jacob Spur fire shaded in blue to the east and the Stockyard Flat fire shaded in grey to the south. That same day, the 8th of November, transpired to be a tragic one. The Carrai Creek Jacob Spur fire claimed, as Your Honour knows, the life of Barry Parsons. Locals, RFS crews and the National Parks and Wildlife Service worked through the night to try and control the fire and save properties, and residents were evacuated to the local school, community hall and pub. The fire eventually surrounded the town, which trapped locals overnight and cut off power and phone services for 8 days. Sadly, dozens of properties and outbuildings were damaged or destroyed. The accounts of some of the residents' experiences contained within the briefs highlight how many were deeply traumatised by their terrifying experiences. The Carrai Creek fire, Your Honour, was finally declared out on 15 January 2020, and the Carrai East fire declared out on 19 January 2020. Your Honour sees now on the screen the progression maps for each of those fires when they were declared out. Dealing now, if I may, Your Honour, with key conclusions as to the cause and origin of these fires. Mr Ian Cook, RFS fire investigator, prepared a fire investigation report for both fires, which is contained within the briefs of evidence. In relation to the Carrai Creek fire, Mr Cook was unable to conduct a physical investigation at the time of the fire due to the remote and inaccessible location, the fire affected roads and active fire activity making it all unsafe. Attempts to conduct an investigation after the fire was declared out was also unsuccessful due to various reasons, such as the inability to secure a suitable aircraft, extreme weather events, and conflicting operational work-related requirements. Mr Cook's report indicates that the cause and origin of the fire cannot be definitively determined without being able to attend the site. However, using the data researched and extracted from ICON, Mr Cook concluded that there is evidence to support the theory that a lightning strike is the suspected cause of the Carrai Creek fire, with the origin being on the eastern side of the Macleay River at or near grid reference 190880. In relation to the Carrai East fire, Mr Cook was unable to conduct a physical investigation because it was ruled to be too dangerous due to the remote and inaccessible location, along with the need to traverse rural roads through fire-affected areas. However, again, with the information provided to Mr Cook through conversations with the incident controller, operations and planning incident management team staff, together with lightning imagery data, the remote isolated location and the extensive data interrogation, Mr Cook determined that the suspected cause of the Jacob Spur and Anderson Road fires, which in addition to the spread of the Carrai Creek fire into the Kempsey local government area, formed part of the complex known as the Carrai East fire, was lightning. Two witnesses gave oral evidence in relation to the fires on 14 March last year, Detective Senior Constable Mark Simmons and David Duff. Detective Senior Constable Simmons was asked to investigate the cause and origin of the Carrai Creek fire in the months following the fires in early 2020. As part of his investigation, Detective Senior Constable Simmons obtained line scans showing the evolution of the two fires, aerial photographs and fire progression maps. Although he could not perform a physical investigation, Detective Senior Constable Simmons came to form the opinion that the most likely cause of the Carrai Creek fire was two lightning strikes on the evening of 16 October 2019 at around 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. One strike was in the locality of Mary View and the other was southeast to that first strike. Mr Duff recollected that there were dry storms in the area in the 6 weeks preceding the ignition of the fire, during which time he saw smoke, evidence of fire and numerous lightning strikes. In respect of the Carrai Creek fire, it is submitted that the cause of that fire is believed to have been a lightning strike on 16 October 2019, and the origin was south of an area known as East Kundarang and west of Mary's View, which lies west of the Plateau and east of the Macleay River in the Armidale local government area. In respect of the Carrai East fire, Your Honour, it is submitted that the cause of that fire, which merged with several fires that made up the Carrai East fire, is believed to have been a lightning strike on 16 October 2019, and that the origin was in remote terrain southeast of the Carrai Creek fire and west of Kempsey. Those assisting, Your Honour, express their sincere gratitude to those who have aided and provided information to the court to assist with the coronial inquiry into the cause and origin of the Carrai Creek and Carrai East fires. We also thank the New South Wales Rural Fire Service for providing written submissions in reply, clarifying the fires that form part of the Carrai East fire. If it's convenient, Your Honour, I propose now to deal with the related inquest, which is the inquest into the death of Barry Parsons. These are the closing submissions for the inquest into the death of Barry Parsons. Barry, Your Honour, was 58 years old when he died, sometime after 5:15 p.m. on 8 November 2019, while attempting to flee the Carrai Creek Jacob Spur fire in his car and subsequently on foot. On 8 November 2019, under extreme weather conditions, the Carrai Creek Jacob Spur fire spread to the small township of Willawarren, impacting properties including a remote rural property off Coroners Track where Mr Parsons lived. Mr Parsons was discovered 5 days later, on 13 November 2019, approximately 200 to 300 metres from his car on a fire trail in bushland, 500 metres south of his property near the Macleay River. Your Honour, I take this opportunity to acknowledge the devastating circumstances of Barry's death and the loss to his family, friends, fellow neighbours and residents of Willawarrin. I understand that Barry's son, Lewis, may be watching the proceedings today. We send to Lewis our heartfelt condolences to him and his family on the loss of his father. On the evening before Barry's death, that is the 7th of November, Barry received a phone call from a friend in Western Australia. The fires were discussed in that phone conversation. However, Barry did not seem concerned about the fires. The remote property on which Barry lived included a small, relocatable structure with a shed at the back and very few trees near the house. A fire trail from the property leads south to the Macleay River, where Barry was known to take his horses. By 7:42 p.m. on 7 November, the Carrai Creek Jacob Spur fire had made a significant run towards the townships of Bellbrook and Willawarrin. Barry was at his Willawarrin property on 8 November and had limited contact with people on that day. Eddie Manning, a resident from Willawarrin, witnessed smoke in the area at about 2:20 p.m. on the 8th of November. He sent Barry a message to tell him to pack what he needed and to get out. Mr. Manning recalled that Barry replied by message and said he was going to go to the Willawarrin Hotel to escape the fire. Between 1:14 p.m. and 1:30 p.m, the Carrai Creek Jacob Spur fire was approaching Barry's home, as evident in New South Wales Rural Fire Service line scan now on screen. At 2:22 p.m, Barry posted a message to Facebook. It said, "Hot and windy day on mid-north coast, smoke everywhere, like dusk at 2 p.m. Barry received advice and messages of support in response to that message, and he replied to some of those messages. In one exchange, Barry stated that he had not been listening to the radio and that he had not seen, and I quote, "a kick, a flame yet, but this is about to get as terrifying as it gets without it. Wind has really blown up, smoke and ash filling the sky." At about 4:30 p.m, New South Wales Police began to evacuate the area and attended Luke Harmon's home on Armidale Road at the intersection with Coronial track. On Mr. Harmon's account, New South Wales Police banged on the door frantically and asked him and his family to evacuate immediately. They also asked Mr. Harmon to assist in ensuring that everyone on Coronial track had left the area. Shortly before 5 p.m, Mr. Harmon saw Barry get out of his vehicle, open his gate, return back into his vehicle and drive away in the direction of Armidale Road via Coronial track. This was the last time Mr. Harmon saw Barry or his vehicle. From the evidence obtained from New South Wales Police, including in-car video footage from the Kempsey Highway Patrol, there was no sighting of Barry's car at or near the Willawarrin Hotel, the nearby evacuation site, during the relevant time. At 4:53 p.m, Detective Senior Constable Michael Duxbury was very near the Coronial track. At that time, fires were burning on both sides of Armidale Road with intense wind from the northeast. Detective Senior Constable Duxbury could go no further and return to Willawarrin. At about 5:10 p.m, Tim Ether returned to Willawarrin from Port Macquarie for the purpose of protecting his property. On returning, he noticed, and I quote, "Everything was just red. It was really hot. Everything was burning." At approximately 5:12 p.m, New South Wales Police started door knocking those on the western side of Willawarrin. Detective Senior Constable Duxbury used the public address system in his police vehicle to broadcast messages alerting residents to leave the town immediately. A few minutes later, at 5:15 p.m, Barry posted another message to Facebook. It said, quote, "Seriously looks and sounds like apocalypse out there." This, Your Honour, was the last communication known to be made by Barry. Shortly after this time, both telephone and mobile service went down and would not have been able to send or receive communications from that time. Hannah Nowden sent Barry an SMS message at about 6:37 p.m. as she was concerned that he had not responded to messages, which was out of character for Barry. Friends, locals and many of Barry's Facebook network also became worried and posted messages online during that evening and the following day. Your Honour, it appears that sometime between 6:40 and 7 p.m, the Carrai Creek Jacob Spur fire passed through Barry's property. Your Honour sees on that map and line scan the location of Barry's residence. In the following days, several searches were undertaken by locals and friends in an effort to locate Barry. Barry's car was eventually found, however, he was not in it. At around 10 p.m. on the 13th of November, Tim Ether, having persisted in his searches, located Barry's body. Barry was located, as I said earlier, about 500 metres south of his property on a fire trail towards the Macleay River. He was located approximately 200 to 300 metres from his motor vehicle. Barry's car was facing a southwesterly direction, that is, in the opposite direction of the route that would be taken to reach the Cayuna track. The car was discovered in dense bush, partially elevated with a fallen log visible underneath the front wheels. The bonnet was propped open with a large log. Your Honour has received into evidence a volume of material which includes statements from members of the New South Wales Police and civilian witnesses, communication records, photographs and videos. Oral evidence was also provided to Your Honour on the 17th of March last year by the New South Wales Police officer in charge of the investigation, Detective Senior Constable Brian Priest, and Barry's neighbour at the time, Luke Harmon. Pursuant to Section 81 of the Coroners Act, the coroner holding an inquest concerning the death of a person is required to make findings as to the identity of the person who died, when and where they died, and what was the cause and the manner of that person's death. In addition, as Your Honour knows, the coroner may make a recommendation considered necessary or desirable in relation to matters which have the capacity to improve public health and safety in the future arising out of the death in question. In this inquest, Barry's identity is known, as is the date and place of his death, and for this reason, the inquest into Barry's death focused on the manner and cause of his death. Detective Senior Constable Priest, who took over the investigation into Barry's death from another officer, gave evidence at the hearing. Detective Priest estimated that Barry's vehicle was approximately 200 metres northeast of his residence and that Barry was located 200 to 300 metres from his vehicle towards the Macleay River. An explanation proffered by Detective Priest as to why Barry was located where he was at some distance from his vehicle and residence was that he may have attempted to leave his residence by vehicle and may have returned. However, no evidence is available to verify Mr. Parsons' movements. Investigating police were unable to provide an explanation as to why and how the bonnet of Barry's vehicle came to be propped open with a large log. In oral evidence, Barry's neighbour, Mr. Harmon, whose property is located on the corner of Cayuna Track and Armidale Road, stated that he would regularly wave to Barry as he passed his gate. He described Barry as friendly and that he had difficulty hearing. Mr. Harmon stated that weather conditions had deteriorated at around 3:34 p.m. on the 8th of November. At around 4:30 p.m, he saw spot fires to the northwest of his property and record seeing Barry's vehicle just prior to 5 p.m, stop at the gate which leads to Barry's property. He stated that he saw Barry's purple vehicle stop and Barry get out of the vehicle to open the gate, which exited the driveway. Barry was then seen to open the gate, get into his vehicle and drive out of his property towards Armadale Road along Coroners Track. Mr Harmon did not see Barry again after exiting his property from his driveway. Mr Harmon returned to his residence the following day and located Barry's burnt-out vehicle on 9 November, sitting over the top of a tree. He observed the bonnet pegged up with a log. He detailed an old driveway, a scrub track covered in sticks and lantana, to the northeast of Barry's residence, which was in close proximity to where Barry's car was located. Barry may have been driving on this track. However, no evidence exists to suggest that the Cuyuna track between Barry's residence and Armadale Road was blocked in the late afternoon and early evening of 8 November, preventing Barry from exiting the area. Mr Harmon told the court that a power pole was on Cuyuna track when he returned to his premises on 9 November, but it is unclear when that pole fell. An autopsy, Your Honour, was conducted following Barry's death, which found that Barry's cause of death was unascertained. On this basis, it is respectfully submitted that Barry's cause of death be recorded as unascertained. He died after leaving his property when it was impacted, or about to be impacted, by the Carrai Creek Jacob Spur fire. The council assisting team, Your Honour, expresses their sincere condolences to Barry's family, friends, fellow neighbours and residents of Willawarren, and of course to his son Lewis for the loss of his father in such tragic circumstances. I'd also like to take the time, Your Honour, to thank the New South Wales Rural Fire Service for providing written submissions in reply clarifying that Barry's property was impacted by the Carrai Creek Jacob Spur fire rather than the Carrai East fire. Your Honour, that concludes my closing submissions in relation to the inquest into the death of Barry Parsons. Your Honour, the order of business for tomorrow is for Your Honour to hear closing submissions in reply by those assisting Your Honour in relation to the Stage 2 backburning operations, planning and execution in relation to the Gross Valley Mount Wilson fire and also in relation to the Coronial cluster of fires, together with the inquest into the deaths of Lawrence Andrew, John Butler and Michael Campbell.
Thank you, Mr Castleton. Resume tomorrow,
10 a.m.
10 a.m.
May it please Your Honour.